Hello and welcome to the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast. Joining me as always, the one and only Miss Fantasy herself, Tera Roberts. How you doing today, Tera?
I'm doing good. I'm ready to talk some football, ready to talk to you. I feel like it's been forever since we've talked.
Well, the Super Bowl is now in the past. That means the calendar for fantasy football is now flipping to 2024, and we've got some free agency here that we need to address. We got quarterbacks, we got running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Now, saying all that, today is officially the first day of basically teams being able to franchise certain players they can't take the franchise tag because they've been tagged twice. Some obviously have too much money associated with having a second tag as well. So when we go through these positions here, I just want to get your thoughts on player A and where's the best place for him to land as far as fantasy is concerned. Where do you want to see him go? And let's kick things off with the quarterback position, starting with probably the biggest free agent name out there right now, and that is Kirk Cousins. Yes, Kirk Cousins, friend of the show. We both love ourselves some Captain Kirk here. Everybody's favorite dad at the quarterback position. So when you look at this, there's a good chance that the Minnesota Vikings aren't going to tag him because, he's been tagged probably more than any other quarterback in the history of franchise tagging. So, Tera, where do you see him being a good fit? Where do you want to see him land?
I want to see him stay in Minnesota. He's the top quarterback on the market officially. I know we have some others who can come into play by not necessarily being free agents, whether that's trade or cut candidate Russell Wilson, stuff like that. But Kirk Cousins, Achilles and all, is technically the top free agent quarterback on the market right now. I just want him to stay in Minnesota. There's appealing places he could go, right? And places with strong receiving cores, not as strong as Minnesota, but strong receiving cores that could at least give him enough targets in order to kind of continue the path that he's been on. But I think what he's got going on there in Minnesota is literally the most ideal situation for him. Prior to the injury, he was absolutely on fire, having what should have, amounted to a career year if he had played out the entire year. The weapons there are endless. There's so many that literally even TJ Hawkinson, who will come back from his injury, hopefully early in the season, is somebody who people are drafting now, like outside of the top 8 at the position. It's TJ Hawkinson. That's how many mouths there are to feed in that offense. So it's Minnesota that I would love for him to stay with.
You know what? This is one of those things. Be careful what you ask for, Minnesota Vikings fans, because they've wanted Kirk Cousins out of there for so long. I don't know if you can have Kirk Cousins leave. We've seen Jaron Hall. We've seen Joshua Dawes. We've seen Nick Mullins. We know what the future in Minnesota is like if Kirk Cousins leaves. You mentioned how good he was up to week number 8 when he suffered that Achilles injury. Nearly 70% of his passes complete, 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Now, for me, there's certain dominoes that could fall ahead of Kirk Cousins that could affect his landing spot. One is the Justin Fields situation there in Chicago. If Justin Fields ends up in Atlanta, well, then Atlanta is off the table because I think Kirk Cousins in Atlanta would be fun with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. Everything that he could possibly want in a team is in Atlanta. But for me, I'm selfish, and I want to see him go to the Las Vegas Raiders because I don't think the Raiders are going to be able to move up enough in the draft to get a Jaden Daniels, to get a Caleb Williams, to even get a Drake May at this point. And I don't want to see them settle for a J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix, Bo Nix type quarterback. We know that the Raiders need to make a move at the quarterback position. If they can't get in on the Justin Fields because he's already scrubbed his social media of Chicago and has now started following all the players there in Atlanta, that means the Raiders, if they want to make a big splashy move, they need to go out there and get a big-time quarterback. And Kirk Cousins is that quarterback for this franchise. Jimmy Garoppolo, he's gone because apparently who knows what kind of prescription medication he was taking there. But I look at Kirk Cousins and Devontae Adams, I'm thinking, hey, this could be one of the best combination wide receiver quarterbacks in the entire National Football League. We saw what Kirk Cousins was able to do with Justin Jefferson. He knows how to get the ball into his hands. He also is going to be able to see what he can do with Jacoby Myers. And if the Las Vegas Raiders are able to retain Josh Jacobs, then you've got yourself a pretty good three-headed monster there in Las Vegas. Now, another quarterback that we got to talk about is probably number 2 on the list. It's a distant 2. It's like Kirk Cousins in tier number 1, and then it drops straight down to like tier 3, tier 4 as far as quarterbacks are concerned in free agency. Ryan Tannehill is an interesting name for me, a guy who lost his starting spot to Will Levis their last season, but we've seen Tannehill have varying degrees of success when maybe not given a whole lot to work with in the past. So when you look at Ryan Tannehill's situation, Tara, where do you think he fits?
This is oddly the hardest one for me because I think that Tannehill is at that point in his career where he just needs to go on and be a backup, maybe a bridge quarterback, but I don't know if that's what he wants as well, kind of transitioning and having to move and pick up a year later. I'm not sure that's what he's ready to dip into, but maybe you go to a place where you just accept that you are going to be a backup and you're going to be a backup to a young quarterback. Maybe go to Washington and you sit there and you're the clear backup, but you're there to help develop. I wish I had a better answer. I know this is lame and my quarterback answers are going to be lame just because I feel like there's more upside and opportunity and fun things to talk about in the guys that aren't technically free agents, but I don't see an ideal landing spot for Ryan Tannehill when you consider the depth of quarterback in this class and available, guys on the market. I don't feel like there's a good landing spot. So I know that's not the most ideal answer in the world, but that's where I'm heading.
It's like the quarterback position is a game of musical chairs this year. We talk about this incoming class. You mentioned that you got your Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix. I mean, these are guys, Michael Penix, JJ McCarthy. There's 6 quarterbacks that are going to take spots no matter how you want to look at it. Probably backup quarterback positions or starters. Then you're left with that next group of quarterbacks, this tier of free agent quarterbacks, which are getting a little bit longer in the tooth. For me, Ryan Tannehill's best fit is probably with the Pittsburgh Steelers, reuniting himself with Arthur Smith, who he had some success with back in Tennessee. That and Kenny Pickett's the quarterback currently there. So there's going to be an option for him to compete for a job. He's going to be that backup, but there's a possibility that he could find himself as a starting quarterback at some point in the season. Now, another quarterback who found himself starting last season is Baker Mayfield. And hey, we're both on the same page here when it comes to the best landing spot for him is where he already happens to be. I have him going to the Bucs. You have him going to the Bucs. He's a potential franchise tag if there's no long-term deal in place. Tara, why does he fit with this Bucs team as well as he does?
I think for him, I do think that a big part of his, resurgence, or even not even resurgence, I mean, really just the coming out of, everything that he struggled through. I feel like a big part of that was definitely Dave Canales. And obviously some of that is heading over to Carolina now, but he's going to be in this, similar system. They're going to make adjustments. I don't, dislike the coach that they brought in. So I think there's a good enough transition here that the best situation for Baker Mayfield is to stay put and continue his development with the Bucs. I think it's a good cost situation for the Bucs. I think Baker will get the contract that he is looking for with the Bucs. They can get on the same page here. And it's probably, again, the best location for him to repeat and go to the playoffs. Obviously, we've got some changes in the NFC South, but probably the best situation for him to repeat his success and continue to go to the playoffs. So Bucs, he just needs to stay with the Bucs, continue what he's doing. Potential loss of Mike Evans is obviously going to be a big blow, but it's the best situation for him.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet there's probably about a 75% chance that Mike Evans will not be in Tampa Bay when we kick off training camp here in 2024. That being said, he knows the system. He knows what the Bucs want to do. He's been there. He's had success. Tampa Bay, they're not going to find a better quarterback right now. They're too far back in the draft to get themselves a stud rookie quarterback. And we talk about these other free agent quarterbacks. They're not really options. So unless they're going to try and make a play for a Justin Fields, Baker Mayfield's probably their best option. Baker Mayfield's best option is probably Tampa Bay because there's not enough seats at the table for quarterbacks this season. Now, speaking of quarterbacks who maybe came back last season, maybe the comeback player of the year, regardless of how you feel about that award, it's Joe Flacco. Where do you see Joe Flacco's best fit for 2024?
am kind of skeptical if Aaron Rodgers is going to make it through the entire season in the Jets. They've got to do a lot in terms of reinforcing that offensive line so that they don't have any injury disasters happen over there. But the Jets clearly, they're moving on if they can from Zach Wilson. Let him go. Let him be free. And they need to have a viable, stable option back up to Aaron Rodgers. They need to have somebody that they know can competently carry the team forward. Why wait until the middle of the season if Aaron Rodgers gets injured and then have to be in the same situation you were last year? Just go out and kick your season off with having your quarterback your confident veteran quarterback in the Jets. So I think going to the Jets would be the best option for him. I could also see him with New England.
Yeah, you know what? It makes a lot of sense. And Aaron Rodgers, he could have a good rapport with Joe Flacco. We know that the Jets are going to move on from Zach Wilson, who we're not including in this list to begin with. But that does be a good fit there for the New York Jets and Joe Flacco. I got him going to the Browns because anything that can make Deshaun Watson uncomfortable, I'm all for when it's all said and done. And Joe Flacco, everyone's favorite player on anyone's favorite team is probably going to be the backup quarterback, the backup goalie, the one who's not necessarily failing at the time. That's going to be the favorite player. So when the Cleveland Browns fans go out there and they see Deshaun Watson even struggle just a little bit, they're going to be banging that drum for Joe Flacco, and I cannot wait to see how uncomfortable the situation becomes for Deshaun Watson in 2024 if he were to stumble. And then what's going to happen? Do the Cleveland Browns, do they make that pull? Do they put Joe Flacco in? Because we saw him have success with this Browns team last season that Deshaun Watson was not necessarily having. We saw Amari Cooper get going. We saw David Njoku get going. As far as fantasy is concerned, Joe Flacco may be the best option for those Cleveland Browns fantasy assets heading into 2024. Now, one more quarterback that I want to talk about is Gardner Minshew of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, I don't know if he's going to end up back with the Indianapolis Colts, but you figure that that's probably his best spot.
Yeah, I think so. Best bet for him to get the most bang for his buck. We talked about the depth of quarterback that we have right now in terms of it's going to be difficult for these guys like Gardner Minshew, Ryan Tannehill to go to new teams and get starting positions. Like it's an odd year for that. Those things could happen last year. So sticking with the Colts in a backup role, probably best situation for him, and then best situation for the Colts as well, because you're moving forward with Anthony Richardson as your franchise quarterback, but you probably do need to be sure that he can actually make it through a full season. I know it's just 1 year, but just, there were multiple injuries, like be careful, be safe, and keep somebody competent on staff because you are a playoff ready team, close enough. And Gardner Minshew is a guy that they should retain. Best situation for both of them.
Well, we saw Anthony Richardson's style last season. It does put himself at some risk, right? So you need to have yourself a solid insurance policy if you're the Indianapolis Colts. Gardner Minshew had some success, but if I'm Indianapolis, I need to get this deal wrapped up right away because if there's other quarterback openings, and I've already got Kirk Cousins moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders, that means there's going to be an opening in Minnesota. And for me, Gardner Minshew with Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, KJ Osborne, Jordan Addison, that is going to be fun for Minshew Mania in Minneapolis there. Talk about a fun offense to watch. So I got Gardner Minshew going to Minnesota, and I think he could be a top 12 fantasy asset there at the quarterback position if he ends up in Minnesota. Now, things are good in Indianapolis. They got a decent offensive line. They got a running game. These are all things that he can have in Minnesota as well. And I'm going to guess he's probably not going to command as much as maybe some of these other quarterbacks out there. So you're going to be able to get him for a reasonable price. If Minnesota, who has been tight against the cap, decides they want to try and save some money and move on from Kirk Cousins, I think Gardner Minshew is an excellent option.